Hi, Dr. Holmes here. I want to try to do something a little bit different with this video today. So, this YouTube channel almost entirely consists of videos that I've recorded for my English classes that I teach. And most of those videos are unlisted. They're things that I've posted and that I've just sent the links to my students or posted them to our content management system. So today I want to try something a little bit different. About 2 weeks ago, I was sent a link to the video Hi Ren. And at this point, I think over 4 million people have viewed the video. And like probably safe to say tens of thousands of those people, I was really blown away by it. I found it very moving and sort of profound and unique, and very interesting. So I've seen the video a bunch of times at this point. This is not a first reaction video. I also have come across a bunch of reaction videos, and I was unaware of just how much of a rabbit hole reaction videos are on YouTube. But there are a lot of them, and an awful lot of people have been watching and commenting on and reacting to Ren's video. So I've seen a bunch of those. I've seen some from musicians, from vocal coaches, filmmakers, pastor, therapists, just a whole bunch of people. And one thing that I came to notice, is that while there's some really interesting takes, commentary, even some analysis of the video, that none of those reaction or analysis videos that I came across focused on or talked about the kind of things that I would talk about with this video. So I saw a kind of gap there, that I think I can try to fill with this video. So I'm going to proceed by analyzing Hi Ren, and I'm going to describe this as a literary analysis. And I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. One is that literary analysis or textual analysis can be applied to a very broadly defined wide range of texts. So nowadays, when we talk about the kind of method approaches to literary analysis, we could be talking about a literary text on the page or screen in terms of novel, short story, poem. We could also be talking about films, advertisements, still images, music and sound. So a literary analysis can encompass all of those things. And so everything in the video Hi Ren is fair game for this. I won't actually talk too much about the production of the video itself, the visuals in it. They are striking and interesting, but I don't think I've got necessarily a lot to add there, as opposed to thinking about the music and the lyrics and, the whole thing as a work of art. So that was one of the main reasons. Another thing about a literary analysis is that I think there are still a lot of people who, when they hear or talk about analyzing a piece of art, film, music, whatever, that they imagine that doing that kind of analysis will sort of suck all the magic out of that. That in order to analyze something, if it's something that you love and enjoy, that it will, by analyzing it, suck all the joy that you get out of that piece of art. And I hope that this video will help show that it's quite the opposite, that actually applying analytical, critical thinking to a piece of art, even something that you really love, can in fact allow you to notice things and see things and find interest in things you might otherwise miss. Elements that are always there, that have always been there, but that are easy to overlook when you're not thinking deeply about the thing that you're analyzing. So analysis doesn't actually suck the life and enjoyment out of something. It can give you new and more fulfilling ways of appreciating it, of noticing things, and ultimately getting more joy out of it. So, with that, I want to have us take a look at Hi Ren. And I will say, I've had a couple of weeks now to think about the video, to watch it several times, watch other responses to it. So I do have some critical, thoughtful distance here, even though I do find this video very emotionally moving. And so I'm going to talk about some of the ways that I think that works. But if you wonder why I sound kind of clinical about it or anything, that's why, is because this isn't a reaction video, it's an analysis. So, without further ado, let's get into the video here. His guitar here is a classical guitar that has nylon strings, and the style of the music, the way that he's playing it, is interesting. A lot of times I think we would hear this kind of guitar now and might think of like flamenco guitar. This sounds more kind of medieval English to me, as I think Rick Beato would describe it as sounding medieval.
Hi there, Ran. It's been a little while. Did you miss me? You thought you buried me, didn't you? Risky. Cause I always come back. Deep down, you know that. Deep down, you know I'm always in periphery. Ran, on your pleased to see me. It's been weeks since we spoke, bro. I know you need me. You're the sheep, I'm the shepherd. Not your place to lead me. Not your place to be biting off the hand that feeds me. Hi, Ran. I've been taking some time to be distant. I've been taking some time to be still. I've been taking some time to be by myself since my therapist told me I'm ill. And I've been making some progress.
It's interesting, this kind of body language here, the way that Ren is performing these two characters. So it's a little bit tricky to try to talk about this video because Ren is the author, right, the artist, but also there are these two separate characters. I mean, essentially they're inside the same character's mind, and we'll talk a lot more about that. But these two separate characters and this kind of dramatic conversation between them, and both of the characters are named Ren, which can make it a little bit tricky. But the Ren that we're looking at right now in the video, some people have described this as sort of the good angel and the bad angel sitting on the shoulders, and that's something I want to talk more about. But I would actually describe this particular character as Ren, the character Ren within the video, and the other voice, the sort of voice of doubt, I think I'm going to call Shadow Ren. And so Shadow Ren is this voice of doubt and criticism and mocking. And so now when we're getting this first exposure to Ren, there's a kind of confidence here, even though he's a little bit hesitant as well, right? Saying that he's been doing well, doesn't think he needs him, hasn't needed him lately. And then we'll see that confidence, kind of get shooken up a little bit as the video progresses.
Lately, and I've learned some new coping skills. So I haven't really needed you much, man. I think we need to just step back and chill. Ren, you sound more insane than I do. You think that those doctors are really there to guide you? Been through this a million times. Your civilian mind is so perfect, you're always being lied to. Okay, take another pill, boy. Drown yourself in the sound of white noise. Follow this 10-step program, rejoice. All your problems will be gone. Fucking dumb boy. Nah, mate. This time is different, man, trust me. I feel like things might be falling in place. And my music's been kinda doing bits too. Like I actually might do something great. And when I'm gone, maybe I'll be remembered for doing something special with myself. That's why I don't think that we should talk, man. Because when you're with me, it never seems to help.
The camera angles, I said I wasn't going to talk too much about the visual aspects of this, but the camera angles and the way it switches back and forth are really brilliant, right? That it actually gives you this different perspective on Ren the performer performing these two separate characters. And of course he's really just, you know, turning from one side to the other, but the change in which camera angle you're getting, which of the cameras, you know, gives you that sense of almost a filmed conversation. Because so often nowadays in films, the way that conversations are done is you'll get this kind of diagonal angle on each character's sort of profile, right, head and shoulders, and it'll switch back and forth between the two characters depending on who's talking. And that's a really, you know, sort of not very natural way of presenting a conversation, but it's something we've become so accustomed to. And it's done really well here, especially since he's doing all this presumably in one take. From what I've come across on the internet, it's suggested that this may have been the fourth take and that it's all been done in one take. So really impressive work here in terms of cameras editing as well as Ren performing all of this. One more quick thing I want to say before starting up the video again. The music is interesting, the way that he switches between the two voices. So some other people have pointed out that the music that goes along with what I'm calling the Ren voice is more sort of calm and level. What is it? Let's see if I can remember it here. And then when it switches to the other voice, it's more aggressive. And of course, that bit of guitar work at the very beginning was very aggressive, really picking those nylon strings very hard with the first opening bit. But it's also interesting, what I haven't seen anybody comment on, is that the rhythm, the palm mutes, when he's playing guitar, all only come in with the Shadow Ren voice. So not only does it sound more potentially, you know, aggressive, just a different tone to the music, but it also has a rhythm and a percussive element and a kind of hammering element with that. So I'll see if I can try to mimic that a little bit here, if I can remember. So it's those palm mutes that give it that percussive element, and those also only come in during the Shadow Ren voice. All right, let's take this a little further.
You think that you can amputate me? I am you, you are me, you are I am we are one, split in two, that makes one. So you see, you gotta kill you if you wanna kill me. I'm not leftover dinner, I'm not scraps on the side. Oh, your music is thriving, delusional guy. Where's your top 10 hit? Where's your interview with Oprah? Wow, your Grammys ran nowhere. Yeah, but my music's not commercial like that. I never chase numbers, statistics or stats. I never write hooks for the radio, they never even play me, so why would I concern myself with that? But my music is really connecting, and the people who find it respect it. And for me that's enough, cause this life's been tough, so it gives me a purpose I can rest in. Man, you sound so pretentious. Ren, your music is so self-centered. No one wants to hear another song about how much you hate yourself. Trust me. You should be so lucky, having me inside you to guide you, remind you to manage expectations, provide you perspective. That thing you neglected, I get it. You wanna be a big deal, next Jimi Hendrix.
So it's interesting, the Shadow Ren voice, the way that he's trying to persuade and appeal to Ren and also intimidate and coerce him. here he's suggesting that he is Ren's inner voice of reason, right? That he's just trying to help him keep perspective. So he's sort of rationalizing his own existence in Ren's head, essentially, right? While he's criticizing him and tearing him down and, sort of insulting him for being passionate about his music and, feeling like he's finding some success in that, and the shadow voice is mocking him, right? Where are your Grammys? Where's your interview with Oprah? It's also interesting that this back and forth is really focused on Ren's music. That last bit of the exchange includes where the shadow voice brings up suicide for the first time. You've got to kill you if you want to kill me. And suicide's going to come up again and be, a really significant issue within the song, within the video. But he mentions it sort of somewhat passively there. But there's this kind of playfulness in the shadow voice. He is actually pretty funny sometimes, although when you're first watching the video, it can hit you so strongly that it's hard to appreciate the humor in some of what the shadow voice says and how he says it. But he can be quite funny, which gives him a certain kind of entertainment and an appeal to the audience.
Forget it. Man, it's not like that. Man, it's just like that. I'm inside you twat. No, it's not, man, you're wrong. When I write, I belong. Let me break the fourth wall by acknowledging this song. Ren sits down, has a stroke of genius. He wants to write a song that was not done previous. A battle with the subconscious. Eminem did it. Played on guitar. Plan B did it.
The "let me break the fourth wall" line there. When I listening to this several times, I kept thinking he was saying, "Let me break the 4-4 here," and so I was thinking about it in terms of the time signature of the music. But in fact, he says, "Let me break the fourth wall." So the fourth wall refers to this idea of a certain kind of meta element commentary, originally coming from drama plays, where breaking the fourth wall would involve a character on stage, perhaps, speaking to another character on stage or saying something about what's going on stage, or delivering some kind of monologue, and then suddenly would turn to the audience and start talking to a person in the audience. And that's breaking the fourth wall, where it's sort of breaking the illusion of watching this, performance as though it is something separate from reality, and suddenly you'll have a character that will address you directly as an audience member. So it's a very kind of meta-dramatic element in that way. And this whole song is meta-dramatic, right? It's because the back and forth that they're having is really focused on Ren's music, and it's happening as part of one of Ren's songs. But here, when he talks about breaking the fourth wall, it's even more direct, because he's talking about the song that he's a character in, right? So it's really meta commentary going on here.
Man, you're not original, you criminal rip-off artist. The pinnacle of your success is stealing other people's material. Ren, mate, we've heard it all before. She sells seashells on the seashore.
See, that's funny.
Fuck you, I don't need you, I don't need to hear this. Cause I'm fine by myself, I'm a genius. And I will be great, and I will make way.
You can even hear a little bit more doubt in Ren's, the Ren voice here, which is really interesting and impressive, as raw and profound and personal as this video seems, it's also very sort of theatrical in the way that he performs these characters. And so, yeah, the Ren voice is becoming a little bit shakier.
And I'll shake up the whole world beneath it. That's right, speak your truth, your fucking God complex leaks out of you. It's refreshing to ask for you, say it instead of downplay it. Music is all about the creative process, and if people can find something to relate to within that, then that's just a bonus. Fuck you, I'ma fucking kill you, Ren. Well, fucking kill me then, let's fucking have you, Ren. I'ma do it, watch me prove it. Who are you to down my music? Cause I call the shots, I choose if you die. Yeah, I call the shots, and so I choose who survives.
Okay, so we're getting suicide back in here again. Talking back and forth about killing the Shadow Ren voice. And it's interesting that some of the most self-doubt in the Ren voice is present here. When he talks about, I get to choose who dies, and he kind of looks down and his voice drops when he says die, and then he like sort of reiterates it. He repeats himself. Let me backtrack just a teeny tiny bit and see if we can hear that again.
You ran, I'ma do it, watch me prove it. Who are you to down my music? Cause I call the shots, I choose if you die. Yeah, I call the shots, and so I choose who survives.
I call the shots, I choose, if you die. Yeah, I call the shots, I choose who survives, right? That repetition, the way his voice drops, his face drops. It's like, he is thinking that killing off this voice would require suicide. And there's this real struggle, not even between the two voices that are both sort of in Ren's head, but within the Ren voice, setting the Shadow voice aside. Like the Shadow voice has, intervened in the Ren voice's own separated thoughts or something here. And so Ren is getting sort of desperate and threatening violence against the Shadow Ren voice. And the Shadow Ren just keeps on pushing him and provoking and saying that there's nothing you can do about it, right? And then we're going to get a significant shift in the voices.
I'll tie you up in knots when I lock you inside. Newsflash. I was created at the dawn of creation. I am temptation. I am the snake in Eden. I am the reason for treason, beheading all kings. I am sin, with no rhyme or reason. Son of the morning, Lucifer, Antichrist, father of lies. Mephistopheles, truth in a blender, deceitful pretender, the banished avenger, the righteous surrender. When standing in front of my solar eclipse, my name is stitched to your lips, so you see, I won't bow to...
So this voice sounds different than the Shadow Ren voice, although this is sort of associated with it. And it's clearly identifying itself as a devil or the devil here, right? The snake in Eden or serpent in Eden, Lucifer, morning star, all of these clear identifications of the devil. At one point he says, I may have paused it before he does, he names himself, I think he says Beelzebub at some point. He says Lucifer. He also says Mephistopheles. And Mephistopheles, could have come to Ren the artist in all kinds of ways, through different culture, art, film, whatever. Originally, as far as I can tell, it can be traced back to T.S. Eliot, the modernist writer, who was using it, came up with it as a kind of contracted version of Mephistopheles. And Mephistopheles is a particular devil in Christopher Marlowe's Renaissance play, Dr. Faustus. And in that play, Mephistopheles is the one who's trying to corrupt Dr. Faustus, lead him to sin, ultimately ensure that Satan gets his soul. And it also includes a good angel and a bad angel, that we've since seen in all kinds of children's cartoons and stuff, Donald Duck, good angel, or Goofy, as a good angel and a bad angel on Goofy's shoulders. but that comes from a medieval dramatic tradition, this idea of a psychomachia, kind of war for the soul. And so that good angel and bad angel that we picture as being on the shoulders also is significant in Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, this early 1590s play that features Mephistopheles. And so when Wren talks about Mephistopheles here, it's another, kind of indication of, some influence there. And that's something I'm going to talk about a little bit more as we get more into this last part with the sort of devil voice and where it's going to go from here.
The will of a mortal, feeble and normal. You wanna kill me? I'm eternal immortal. I live in every decision that catalyzes chaos, that causes division. I live inside death, the beginning of ends.
Music is chaotic.
I am you are me, I am you, friend.
Lights are flashing and chaotic. And then it settles.
I've been taking some time to be distant. I've been taking some time to be still. I've been taking some time to be by myself, and I've spent half my life ill.
Okay, I'm probably going to pause it a few times in this section. So the devil voice, the Mephistopheles voice, is clearly the devil. It's consistently the devil throughout that little bit of monologue there. All of the identification bits in that, I'm thinking in terms of plays, so I was about to call it a speech, but all of the images, metaphors, phrases, descriptions that come up there just clearly indicate devil for that voice, right? This voice is a little bit interesting too, though. So the devil voice sounds different from the Shadow Wren voice. They do seem to be kind of affiliated, and again, I'll say more about that. So this voice is trying to talk back to the devil voice, sort of responding to it. And at some points, I've seen other people, talk about sort of the good angel, bad angel thing, or talk about the devil and then this being like a God voice or something like that. But at this point, the voice is clearly Wren, right? Talking about spent half my life ill. I've been taking some time to be still. He's saying the same things he was telling the Shadow Wren voice at the beginning of the dialogue section. So while there will be some indications of, kind of a God figure with this voice, this part and some other parts are going to kind of signify this as Wren, and not in a God complex kind of way that the Shadow voice accuses him of.
But just as sure as the tide starts turning, just as sure as the night has dawned, just as sure as the rainfall soon runs dry when you stand in an eye of a storm. I was made to be tested and twisted. I was made to be broken and beat. I was made by his hand, it's all part of his plan that I stand on my own 2 feet.
Okay, so here's, this clear reference to, or it seems like a pretty clear reference to sort of a Christian God. But he's talking about, being created by his hand and being part of his plan. So it's still Wren here, even if there's this kind of affiliation of the Wren voice with God. It's still Wren. And he's going to talk about being eternal because, right, part of the devil voice that we just had was, I'm immortal, I've been around since the dawn of time. And so, what could a mortal possibly do to me? And this voice in response to that is going to talk about being eternal and immortal in some ways that are kind of challenging that, but it's much more interesting and complicated and sophisticated than just trying to set it up as like God versus the devil here.
And you know me, my will is eternal. And you know me, you've met me before. Face to face with a beast, I will rise from the east and I'll settle on the ocean floor. And I go by many names also. Some people know me as hope. Some people know me as the voice that you hear when you loosen the noose on the rope. And you know how I know that I'll prosper? Cause I stand here beside you today. I have stood in the flames that cremated my brain, and I didn't once flinch or shake. So coward the man I've become.
So this is Ren again, right? We had some suggestions there. There were a couple lines suggesting that this voice was a kind of voice of God. But now it's clear that we're back to Ren, right? Coward the man that I've become. That line about being the voice that you hear when you loosen the noose on the rope is just brilliant and so powerful, you know, after identifying himself as hope. And it's interesting here. So, you know, so we had, when it was talking about like the voice coming from the east and settling on the ocean floor, you know, those are kind of, at least the east and west thing is very kind of biblical references to, you know, sort of Satan and Christ or something like that. But this voice, even though there's some suggestion of it being a God voice at parts of that, the idea that he's the voice of hope, the voice that you hear when you loosen the noose on the rope, that voice is, in some ways, it's Ren's voice, right? And it's important and significant that it is Ren who is, you know, trying to make this claim for being this voice of potential hope and inspiration with this song, right? So yeah, I might say more about that in a moment. We'll let him get through the really striking singing part here.
When I sing from the top of my lungs, that I won't retire or stand in your fire, inspired I make to be strong. And when I am gone I will rise in the music that I left behind. Ferocious, persistent, immortal like you, we're a climate different side.
Okay, so there we go. And when I'm gone, you know, my music will live on. I'll live on through my music. I'm immortal like you, right? So this voice is also immortal, but it's a different kind of immortality. It's not because this voice is God or Christ or some kind of holy figure versus, you know, a kind of literalized devil. It's because this voice is eternized, immortalized through music, through this song, that the artist who created this can live on long after his body has died, because the music can still be played and listened to, the lyrics can still be read, that the art lives on, and that he is immortalized in that art. So when he talks about I'm immortal too, you know, it's not some kind of cosmic spiritual thing. I mean, there's a sort of spiritual aspect to it, but it's really this idea of art immortalizing him. And this goes way, way back. Some of Shakespeare's sonnets. Shakespeare wrote a sonnet sequence, and the first, I want to say 18 of them, are often referred to as procreation sonnets, where he's talking about a fair young man who should have children so that you know, his gloriousness can live on. And then after sonnet, I think it's 18, that kind of rhetorical appeal stops, and suddenly the speaker of these sonnets starts talking about how he will allow the fair young man to live on through his poems, that the art of his poetry will eternize, make eternal the fair young man. And of course, 400 years later, people are still reading Shakespeare's sonnets. So that's the kind of counter argument that Wren is making here. And it's really kind of interesting and profound, and uses this imagery of the good angel and the bad angel and God and the devil, but then also ties it in to his music and his art, and is trying to use that as a way of both empowering himself in being able to convey these thoughts and emotions, and then also in hopefully empowering and inspiring and being able to create some hope for others, right? So it's really, really interesting, deep, creative stuff going on here. So the two sides of a coin, it's a little bit different than how it might initially appear. I am going to play the monologue bit that comes after the music in a moment, but it might be a good time to just talk a little bit more about how I see the connections between the kind of devil voice, this sort of, I don't know, should we call it God Wren voice, or whatever, the sort of final voice of hope. Maybe we just call it the voice of hope. And Shadow Wren and Wren, right? The first two voices that we were getting. So, it could be read, it could be understood, interpreted that the devil voice is, that the shadow voice was always the devil voice, that the shadow was always the devil, that it's in fact the devil that causes self-doubt and self-criticism and deprecation. This song, this video could be interpreted in that way. But the way that the shadow voice kind of varies his attempts at persuasion and appeal and intimidation and coercion makes me think that it might be more useful to think of the devil voice as being a kind of desperate, sort of Hail Mary by the shadow voice, essentially. That, Wren, between Wren and the shadow Wren, it ends with him talking about killing the shadow, and then ultimately he says he's going to lock him up deep inside and never let him out. And therapists might hear that and say, like, that sounds potentially like not a very long-term positive kind of way of coping with that particular voice, trying to just bury it down and lock it away. But it's also, him sort of acknowledging that he can't kill this voice because it really is part of him. And then the voice changes. We get the news flash, right? And now it is almost further externalized, this kind of allegorical devil that shows up and claims to have been the shadow voice all along, or is associated with the shadow voice, but is in fact the devil and is immortal. And, it seems to me like, because the Wren voice and the voice of hope, the way that those are associated and the way that the hope comes from Wren's music and is so closely associated with that, and that Wren is trying to defend his music and advocate for it when talking back to Shadow Wren, that makes me think that the devil voice is in fact still Shadow Wren, trying to persuade Wren that ultimately he's going to win, that Wren can't do anything about it, because he claims to be the devil, immortal, as old as time, far bigger and impossible to harm than a regular person. And so it seems like it's an attempt at that persuasion, intimidation, coercion by the shadow voice. And then we have Wren coming back as this voice of hope talking back to it and really finding this strength that the Ren voice was struggling with a little bit when it was the back and forth with the shadow voice in the first half of the dialogue section, maybe. There's probably more to say about that, but let's hear the music a little bit and get into his dialogue, or his monologue at the end. I'm going to pause again while he's putting his guitar down before he starts speaking here. So one more element I wanted to mention about this as a kind of literary analysis is that it could be some people, somebody might come across this video and say, well, I'm not convinced by any of this analysis that it makes more sense to me that the devil voice is the devil and the voice of hope is God, or something like that, or that my connecting elements of this to Dr. Faustus, this Renaissance play, that I don't have enough evidence to make that claim persuasive or something like that. So, in literary criticism, authors, artists matter, but modern criticism isn't about trying to decipher the author's intentions or what they wanted, or their exact message, or what they were trying to convey. It's about the message, the text, the artwork itself, and what it conveys, because there could be elements in there that the author isn't even consciously aware of. Could be things contributed by other people who, helped create this. But even if it was just, lyrics on a page, all written just by him, that there could be elements of that, that carry meaning for, potentially there for any reader, things that are right there in the text. It's not reading between the lines, but it's ways of thinking about those lines that the author may not have even been aware of or consciously thinking about when they were writing. So in that sense, I don't actually need to prove that Ren read or watched a performance of Dr. Faustus. Because that's not usually how regular people in the world think about film and music and art, in trying to analyze it. I was tempted to, at the very least, try to reach out to my stepsister in London and ask her, given Ren's age, what is the likelihood, growing up in England, that he would have read or seen Dr. Faustus at some point in his education. I did consider doing that, but I ultimately didn't. I think it is likely that he is somewhat familiar or directly influenced by that. But as I said, he doesn't have to be. The good angel and bad angel thing could come from old Disney cartoons and stuff like that. So the influence could have influenced other things that influenced Ren. And I'm not trying to make this out as being this medieval artwork, but that these themes and the characters he's got here and the way that he's using them are really part of what's so interesting about it, is the way that he's using conventions and tradition images and metaphors that would be recognizable to people in different ways. All of those references to the devil as being the snake in Eden, Lucifer, Morning Star, Beelzebub, Mephistopheles. Some people would understand that differently, more clearly than others might, right? So it's really interesting the way that Ren uses those aspects. Let's go ahead and listen to his monologue, and then I'll have some final thoughts on this as we wrap up.
When I was 17 years old, I shouted out into an empty room, into a blank canvas, that I would defeat the forces of evil. And for the next 10 years of my life...
One thing I love about this monologue is that he uses these metaphors and images that sound somewhat conventional, recognizable, right? That's a good thing. It makes it legible to a broad audience. But then he has all of these little intricate, slight twists in there, where he ends up going a different direction than what we might usually expect. So when he's talking about, being determined to defeat the forces of evil, and then for the next 10 years, you're expecting there to be some kind of like heroic thing, and instead he talks about suffering for it, right? Like paying a price for being determined to fight against the darkness.
I suffered the consequences with autoimmunity, illness, and psychosis. As I got older, I realized there were no real winners and there were no real losers in psychological warfare, but there were victims and there were students. It wasn't David versus Goliath. It was a pendulum, eternally swaying from the dark.
He's shifting
to the
from
light.
David and Goliath to a pendulum.
And the more
such an
intensely
interesting
that the light shone,
transition.
the darker the shadow it cast. It was never really a battle for me to win. It was an eternal dance. And like a dance, the more rigid I became, the harder it got. The more I cursed my clumsy footsteps, the more I struggled. So I got older, and I learned to relax. And I learned to soften, and that dance got easier. It is this eternal dance that separates human beings from angels, from demons, from God.
Oh, yeah.
And I must not forget, we must not forget that we are human beings.
Describing this struggle as a dance and not a war in which anybody's going to win. So my final thoughts on this, how and why this is so powerful and profound and moving to so many people. So he mentioned psychosis in the monologue, and while literary analysis I'm not bound to have to look into what he said about what he's trying to say in the song. I have come across things on the internet where he's talked about having actual, at times, auditory and I think even visual hallucinations, apparently caused by medicine that he was, because of a misdiagnosis, but that those hallucinations, right, seem to be at least part of the inspiration for these different characters, these voices that we get in the video. But part of what's so brilliant about this is that he's written it and crafted it in this way that can appeal to different people on all these different levels, so that even if he was very kind of literally thinking in terms of voices in his head and having to argue back and forth with them, the idea that in all kinds of mental illness, including much more common and still often very serious mental illness in terms of like anxiety and depression, that often those of us who suffer and struggle with mental illness, that, you know, a lot of therapists will actually talk about trying to talk back to the voice, trying to talk back to the illness as a coping mechanism, as a way to try to deal with mental illness. And so that idea of kind of imagining your illness as a voice that you need to talk back to, that you need to try to fight back against, and that essentially most, you know, serious chronic mental illness isn't necessarily ever going to be, you know, people aren't necessarily ever going to get cured from it. They might manage better. They might find long periods of relief, you know, maybe from a certain period onward. But that the mental illness is always there. It just might be, you know, dormant. It might have gone into remission, essentially. And so this idea at the end, when he's talking about this dance that's eternal, that it's never a war, and it's never a war that can be won, that the other side can never be fully defeated or killed. And that seems very much what the voices in the video are trying to represent, I think. And so they may be this very direct, you know, thing kind of inspired by hallucinations, but they also work because of the way that he's crafted them, and I would argue because of the kind of literary, cultural, you know, references and things that are going on there, that it's also really connects with a larger group of people who struggle with other types of mental illness, of which there's many, right? So when I said, I think, you know, tens of thousands of those 4 million people, 4 million views of the video have really found this profound and moving and striking, that I think that's part of the reason why, that he's crafted it in this way that can be really broadly appealing to lots of people really struggling with mental illness, and that he connects very directly with that, even though it's very sort of personal to him, and it's very sort of theatrical too. So really, really interesting how he's done that. And then there's an even larger, broader circle of connection, and I've come across several reactions that have talked about that kind of mental illness piece in some sense. Hopefully this video has helped maybe some people understand how, you know, the High Ren video has connected and moved them. But yeah, lots of other people have responded to that because of connecting it to their own mental illness. And then an even much larger circle than that includes people who have, you know, what they could think of as a voice of doubt within their heads. And I think the way that he's presented that voice of doubt makes it especially connect to artists, musicians, singers, other kinds of artists whose voices of doubt might be questioning the, you know, how can they really think of themselves as successful? What does success even look like with art? You know, you put your passion and your love into this thing, and then what if nobody ever sees it or hears it or appreciates it or even pays attention, right? That those voices of doubt are really this very kind of human, I still would hesitate to say universal, but much sort of broadly appealing and directly connecting to people who have never had visual or auditory hallucinations, and maybe even who've never experienced serious mental illness, but have still experienced this sense of a voice of doubt and self-criticism that they've sort of struggled with. Could be artists, certainly doesn't have to be. Imposter syndrome can strike all kinds of people in all kinds of ways. But thinking about that as an identifiable voice is, again, I think very, very sort of commonly, broadly appealing and able to connect with people. So I think it's really brilliant what he's done here and how he's poured so much passion and pain into this and then crafted it in this way that can be so broadly appealing and entertaining and moving and just powerful and profound for people. So that's it. That's my thoughts. I'm interested to hear what other people think. Feel free to leave some responses in the comments. Just try to keep them respectful. And I will see you next time. Thank you.